So you're all very welcome this afternoon. So this session is focusing on postgraduate study options. And I suppose, you've joined it because possibly you're asking yourself the question, how do I know if postgrad study is for me? So first of all, to introduce myself, my name is Elaine Kiley. I'm one of the careers advisors in the UL Career Service. And myself and my colleagues are happy to meet with you individually for appointments if you want to kind of discuss, I suppose, your own further study options or future plans. But the idea of this presentation is to kind of give you a sense of maybe a little bit of information around like kind of postgrad study and also, as I said, like kind of some resources that would be useful to you regardless of whether you're talking about postgrad study or not. So first, just to set everything, I suppose, into context, career planning, we describe it as a cycle. And so the general model of career planning that's used is of, a circle. And it comprises, I've got 4 parts to it here, but it can be, 6 or 8, but they're all pretty much looking at the same thing. So part of it is, understanding yourself, what you're good at, what your experiences are, what your preferences are, what your values are, what your personality is like. So knowing yourself. And then exploring options, and those options might be further study, might be graduate opportunities, might be work experience, and so looking at like kind of what all of those options are. And then once you've gathered all that information about yourself and about opportunities, making choices and then taking action. So deciding which routes you want to go, or maybe you have like a couple of parallel routes that you're looking at in tandem, and then taking different types of actions toward that. So for example, in the instance of postgraduate study, your action is going to be the application form. If it's graduate recruitment, you're talking about also application forms and interviews and such. So, I mean, interestingly, the action kind of tends to be the same in both. You may not always have to do an interview for postgraduate study, but it may be the case, depending on the course that you do. But it's the same process. It's the same model that you'll use regardless of whether you're choosing to go on and do postgraduate study. And in fact, once you're in postgraduate study, then you're going to be using this model again when you're thinking in terms of leaving postgraduate study. So, you'll know yourself, you'll know more about yourself in terms of your interests, your abilities, your skills, your competencies. Once you've done your postgraduate study or in the process, you'll also be exploring opportunities then from that, making choices and taking action. So this cycle, I suppose, is useful to think of. It's something that like kind of you will use over the course of your lifetime, a number of times that you'll go through iterations of this, and each time the knowing yourself will like kind of develop. You'll know more about yourself, you'll know different things about yourself, and there'll be different opportunities that you'll want to explore. But I think it's just a good analogy maybe to use to kind of set the scene. In terms of us in the career service, then how we can support you through that cycle, over and over, is we've a load of different supports that are available to you. So for example, today we're talking about, postgraduate study. I'll talk a little bit about supporting statements or personal statements that are often required as part of a postgraduate study application. But also in that sense of like kind of understanding yourself and exploring like kind of an identifying, yourself and your, I suppose, skills and abilities. It's also, looking at your values, what's important to you, what motivates you to do what you're doing. And it's not just maybe identifying a list of skills, it's also thinking about how you can articulate those, how you can talk about those, either, to yourself, to on an application form, in an interview, and then also reflecting on like kind of your personality preferences, and like all of those aspects will influence you in terms of the choices that you make around further study or career. Developing awareness of your strengths, so that very much ties in with like kind of your skills and preferences. So a strength is something that you're good at, but also something that you enjoy, and looking at those and pursuing those, because that's where you're going to be, I suppose, find most happiness and contentment. And then there's also I suppose supports that we give you around psychometric tests. So these are tests that you will find, particularly, I suppose, employment more so than postgraduate study, that you'll be asked to do numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, abstract reasoning, but actually they can be useful for you to do to kind of get a sense of your own aptitudes and your abilities in terms of thinking about postgraduate courses that you want to do. But psychometric tests are also, the values. So as well as thinking about what's important to you, you can also do questionnaires that will give you, insight into, based on like kind of structured questions that would give you a sense of your interests and your values and your personality. And so they're all available to you as a student of UL. We look at the job search. So in the same way we're looking at postgraduate study today, we also talk about like kind of, what is job search, how you might engage with that. We have career workshops and employer webinars. We offer, modules and professional development workshops. And then into the practical things. So around the take action, we look at CVs, interview preparation, assessment centers, LinkedIn profiles. So all of those are services that are provided to you through the career service. And then as well as doing that individually face-to-face, that's provided to you through a series of different platforms that we have purchased that you can avail of free of charge while you're a student. So the first of those is this team focus platform that I've on the slide there. And this is where you can go in and complete the personality assessment, the verbal, numerical, abstract reasoning, resilience scale, values-based indicator, career interest inventory. So there, I would highly recommend that you go in, register, so you'll be able to register with your UL email, your student email, and set up your own profile, complete those tests or questionnaires, and you'll get detailed reports that are really useful, insightful for you, but also tools that you can use that will even help you going through an application process, even in terms of writing about yourself. Or, like you'd often see, say, for example, you'd be asked, well, why are you interested in this course? If you're talking about applying for further study, or in an interview, what are your strengths and weaknesses? All of the results from the tests and the questionnaires that you do from the Team Focus platform will help you in terms of being able to think about and answer those questions. Very practical platforms that you can avail of then are CV reviews. So many postgraduate study programs will ask you to submit your CV. So you can submit your CV into this career set platform, and you'll get a free CV review available to you. And again, it'll give you like kind of detailed feedback in terms of how you can optimize your CV and tailor it. You can also, there's additional things that you can do in there. You can put in, say, for example, a job description or a course description, and you can upload your CV along with that and have it reviewed relative to the description that you upload. And then, I suppose last but not least, in terms of platforms, we have, I skipped ahead there. We have ShortlistMe, which is a practice video interview platform. Again, I suppose, like I said, you wouldn't always find that there'd be an interview required for a postgraduate study program, but there may be. And even the online engagement of doing a video interview is very good practice for yourself in terms of kind of getting you to think about the questions and answering them in a time frame. So each of the questions that are on the platform, you'll get 2 minutes to be able to answer those questions, and it just gets you thinking and structuring your thought process so that you're quite succinct in the way that you are able to showcase like kind of the skills that are being asked about. So there are 3 very useful platforms that I think, while not specifically geared towards someone who's applying for postgraduate study, they're very, very useful, and they'll be useful aside from postgrad study, just in terms of general self-development and professional development. And I'd recommend that you all have a look at those. But if we're focusing on postgraduate study, I suppose, what are the reasons people choose to do postgrad study? So it might be that it's a requirement for your career going forward. You may need a professional qualification. So for example, an accountancy ACCA, or you might need to do a PME, a postgraduate Masters of Education, if you want to become a teacher, or if you've studied psychology but you're not accredited with the Psychological Institute of Ireland, then you may do a conversion course, to achieve that accreditation. So it may be a requirement. It may be that you're just passionate about your subject area. You love your FYP, or you loved a particular module that you're studying, and you want to, I suppose, focus on that in a more in-depth way. And oftentimes postgraduate study allows you to delve into something like kind of a little bit more deeply than you would in an undergraduate scenario. Maybe it's like kind of, very practical about improving your job prospects. So, you have your general knowledge through your undergraduate degree, and then by specializing in a postgraduate, you're making yourself a stronger applicant for roles going forward. or it could be like kind of a complete change. So you might be taking a different course and moving direction. And these are often called conversion courses. So you'd find those, for example, you know, so you have a completely different undergraduate degree, and then you might do a postgraduate in IT, in law, and a lot of these may be graduate entry. So you'd have like kind of a graduate entry program into law. So someone who's never studied law, they'll do a 2-year postgraduate, and then that will give them the opportunity to go on and do the FE1 exams, for example, if they want to become a solicitor. You may have all heard of the graduate entry medical program. So again, anyone that wants to study medicine, regardless of what course they've done as their undergrad, they can apply to study medicine as a graduate entry program. Now, there's a number of requirements for that, but these would be called conversion courses. Or say, for example, business programs. So you might have, for example, an MA in business management. And that would be for someone who's like kind of not come from a business background, but wants to add a business course, you know, to their portfolio of skills and accreditation. Or another example there, or a fine example, is health sciences. So you'll find for a number of, and these are often called professional programs, professional masters. So someone who wants to become an occupational therapist or a speech and language therapist, that they, regardless of what undergrad they've completed, they can apply to do a professional master's in those areas. And again, you know, for many of the conversion courses, they may not be 1-year programs, they may be 2-year programs. So that's just something that you'd look at, like kind of in the context of each program that you're looking at. So in terms of then your postgrad course, I suppose there's a couple of different options. You may be, you know, deciding to do a taught or a research program. So generally speaking, if you're talking about doing your graduate diploma, a postgraduate certificate, or a master's, that they tend to be taught programs. And then a research would be a research master's or PhD. So the I suppose in terms of like kind of time frame, a postgraduate certificate and a postgraduate diploma will tend to be the academic calendar. So say starting from September to May or June, whereas a master's program, you tend to have to complete a research project during the summer months. So often called a dissertation or a thesis. And that would be, you know, so then you'd be talking about September to September, say, for example, for a master's program. A research master's or PhD, then a PhD is generally about 4 years. A research master's can be, you know, anything between like kind of 2 and 3. And so they're just things, I suppose, to bear in mind in relation to like kind of your choice of postgraduate program. I suppose it does tend to be the case now that more people would like sign up for a PhD than a master's. But again, it depends on like kind of what your interest area is. Modes of study then. So, you know, are you going to think about coming back full time or staying full time in college, or maybe do you want to like kind of do a part-time program? Way more programs now than like kind of, you know, 2 years ago will have distance or online option, or even a blended option now, and you know, where you'll have some face-to-face but also some online opportunities. And again, you know, that depends a little bit on your personal preference, but also it's worth looking at like kind of in terms of the programs. And then, you know, in terms of your choosing a postgraduate course, it is also good to look at like kind of job prospects. So, you know, some employers, as I said, will target like kind of postgrad qualifications, and that specialist knowledge will like kind of give you an advantage over others. But as well as like kind of, you know, I suppose, you know, choosing a postgrad program in terms of the prospects that it will give you career-wise, you will also be increasing your network of contacts and opportunities like kind of throughout, you know, throughout the course of like kind of your study. Application process differ, so you will need to do your research on that. I don't think any individual, you know, in the career service or in any career service would be able to kind of tell you all of the different kind of deadlines for like kind of different courses. I suppose suffice it to say that like some programs, particularly if there's an external kind of accrediting body to it. So like the likes of the Teaching Council will be involved in accrediting teacher training programs, or CORU, for example, would be involved in accrediting the occupational speech and language therapy. So if there are, you will find like kind of oftentimes that they have like kind of deadlines imposed upon them. So you do need to kind of do your research around deadlines. But many courses offer what's called a kind of a rolling application process, so that you could submit your application at any time, and you could actually get a conditional offer or a definitive offer in relation to the program. So you get an offer, and the conditional offer may be saying, you know, if you continue to maintain the degree, or like kind of the level that you're at in terms of your degree, then, you know, you get a place on the program. So that's the first thing, I suppose. Do your research on that. Application forms generally tend to be online now. So if you were applying, for example, for a program in UL, even a lot of the information they'll have already, because you are a UL student. But generally speaking, you know, you'll need to put in your academic qualifications and achievements, and that might be all of your modules and grades. It may ask you for your employment experience, and generally speaking, you'll be asked for a supporting statement. And that, you know, that could be as simple as, you know, why do you want to study this program? So you just need to have a think about that. And I have a couple of slides that I'll show you on that in a second. Again, it's very normal for you to be asked for a transcript of your results. Now, if you're in your final year, you won't have an official transcript as of yet. You'll have to wait until you finish, but you'd be able to give, say, a current transcript and then follow up with an official transcript. Again, not an issue if you're applying to UL, because the Graduate and Professional Studies will be able to access that, you know, after you've graduated or after you've completed your exams. And then some postgraduate programs will interview candidates. So again, you know, that ShortlistMe platform that I showed you is a very good one to kind of practice. And you can also engage with myself or any of the team, and we'd be happy to talk to you in terms of interview practice. So some application do's and don'ts. So, I mean, I guess this is for every single application. Try not to leave it to the last minute. I know that can be sometimes easier said than done when you have a lot of stuff on your plate, but you know, in as much as you can, to kind of schedule a time frame and not leave it up until like kind of the final window of opportunity. You need to think about how you can show that you've researched the course and the institution. So just like kind of, have you done some background research on the course? Have you managed to find someone that maybe you could talk to? Have you looked at like kind of maybe the department in the institution that you're interested in, and what they're doing, and what like kind of people do within the department, and research and study? Look at your own interests and achievements in terms of how they might support your application. And then particularly like kind of if you consider a postgrad study, and if you're doing a master's or a PhD where there's going to be a strong research component, to show that you have strong research skills. So anything that you've done in your undergraduate, including your FYP, for example, your final year project, will be very good to showcase your research skills. And then if you are invited to an interview, as a rule of thumb, treat it like you would a job interview, that it is, you know, assessing your suitability. So the three things that we'd often say that an employer is looking to see in a job interview is, can you do the job, will you do the job, and will you fit in? You could apply that, like kind of those same three questions for a postgraduate study program. You know, can you do the course? Will you do the course? Are you motivated, enthusiastic, and will you fit in? You know, have you got the knowledge and skills that you need in terms of fitting into the course, the department, the institution? Okay, so if we look at a little bit at personal statements, or supporting statements, they'll sometimes be called. These are important, and it gives you, because you may also be asked to include your CV. So this does give you an opportunity to expand on information that you have in your CV on, you know, on the application form or with the application form. And it is also a chance for the course director, when they're reading that, to kind of find out, it's more of a narrative. You're telling a story about why, you know, you want to do the program of study that you're interested in. And, you know, it like any kind of good piece of writing, you may need to do several drafts before you're happy with like kind of the final result, because generally speaking, you know, you might either be limited in terms of your word count with the application form, or you'd expect to try and write it within like kind of about a page. So it's kind of like the cover letter equivalent if you're thinking in terms of job search. But writing it. So some universities will tell you what they want you to put into the personal statement. And if that's the case, make sure that you follow those instructions. And I would say if you are getting instructions like that, a good idea so that you don't miss out on any of those is get a blank page, divide it in half, you know, lengthwise, and just take out all of the words, all of the instructions that you see from the university and jot them down the left-hand column, and then try and like kind of match examples of how you meet each of the instructions that they have in your experience, so that you're ticking each of the things that they want, like kind of in the personal statement. But if it is left up to you, the structure could be something like this. So the first section or first paragraph is, you know, why you have chosen the course, the profession, the university, what your qualifications are and relevant subjects that you've done and projects that you've completed that would make you a good candidate for the postgrads program, your own personal qualities and achievements that would make you suitable. So again, you know, this is very much like kind of taking your extracurricular activities into account. So it's not just all about it's not all about your academics. And then work experience that you have. Now, remember, it doesn't have to be that like kind of the work experience is directly relevant to the postgrad study that you are applying for. But, you know, what you want to do is think in terms of like kind of say the teamwork and the communication and the organizational skills, and they'll all be relevant and necessary for any career. So you want to think about like kind of how what you've learned from your work experience would be helpful to you in the course. And then your final like kind of paragraph or section is summing up your suitability for the course and showing clearly that you know what you want to get from it. So the look and sound of the letter. So again, pay close attention to the paragraphs. You know, you don't want you won't be able to include everything, so you need to try and choose, you know, what's most relevant for the application. And remembering that your writing is a reflection of your work, so you want to be as impressive as possible, and particularly if courses are highly competitive. It's fine to say I and my in personal statements, but you don't want to overuse them. And just linking words, you know, additionally, furthermore, however, will link like kind of sentences, and that's probably a good idea. And also read it out loud, you know, to yourself, someone else, and just hear how it sounds. I suppose equally what to avoid is, you know, big overused cliches. You know, since I was a child, I've always loved, or like that, I have a thirst for knowledge. They're very like kind of generic. So just be careful of those. Stating the obvious. So again, you know, it's great to say in my work experience, I learned to communicate effectively with children, particularly like kind of, you know, from whatever work that you were doing, but you don't want to kind of like say, you know, which is an important skill in teaching, because that, you know, we know that's the case. So it's less about like kind of giving those like kind of big, broad, obvious statements. Over flattery, you know, it'd be such an honor to be offered a place, well-renowned, world-renowned. So again, like kind of avoid too much flattery in that sense. So just be more evidence-based, or sweeping statements, you know, using words like vast, or you know, many or multiple or variety. Like so what you want to try and do is like give concrete evidence, like kind of rather than generics. So they're the things I suppose to be careful and to avoid in your personal statement. So I suppose we're coming kind of to a conclusion now. So if I were like kind of summarizing your personal statement, you want to tailor it to the subject area that you're applying for to show your interest. Show them that you know like kind of the skills and qualities that you have and how they relate to the course. Try not to leave your statement and your application to the last minute, because it's good to kind of draft and maybe even get some feedback and others to read it. And check your spelling and grammar, because again, even doing word check or spell check on words won't necessarily always like kind of, you know, show you words that you didn't mean to include, you know, so they may be spelled correctly but not the correct word to put into your letter. And keep a copy, because, you know, that's something that you can refer to, both your application and your letter, because it may be referred to in an interview scenario. So, okay, in a final kind of like, I suppose, roundup, the 10 tips that we would recommend in terms of, for you that you can try and find the right postgrad course. So think in terms of the type of program. So is it researcher taught? Is it a conversion course? Is it a, postgraduate diploma, master's? Look at the range of options. And so it's a good idea to like kind of, do general searches and websites and directories of like kind of the various different postgrad programs. So use like kind of the subject word searches on websites. Talk to your academic advisor or your FYP supervisor, because they'll be someone who you'll be linking in with in terms of your research as an undergrad. And so it's a very good idea to talk to them like kind of about your research interest or your interest in pursuing a postgrad. Look at funding options that you may apply for. Funding is more readily available for research postgrads than it is for taught. But again, look at the admission section, look at the graduate and professional study sections of website, and that'll give you like kind of links to funded opportunities that may be there. Check on closing dates. So grades are important. Now for the majority of particularly taught postgraduate programs, a 2.2 honours is what they're looking for. But particularly for like kind of PhDs, you'd find that it would tend to be quite competitive, and oftentimes the majority of candidates will have first class honours if they're going directly in. So pay attention to achieving the best result you can. Academic references, again, would be important from the perspective of applying for postgraduate study. And so if you have someone who supports your academic plans, who can show that you're a good researcher or say that you're a good researcher, then that's important. And so, having that like kind of rapport with your FYP supervisor is important, both in terms of chatting about like kind of postgrad study, but also in terms of academic references. Your application technique, as we said, is important. So the personal statement, making sure that you don't do spelling errors like I have done on my slide there. It should be MENT, not METNT. So again, I would have gone through spell check and that didn't even find that. So that's something that you want to be careful of. Talk to other postgrads in your own department. So talk to people who, maybe have like kind of gone on and done a postgrad a year idea to I suppose get that like kind of inside knowledge from them, and then be prepared to persevere. So it might be that you need to like kind of apply more than once or to a number of different programs, particularly if they are highly competitive programs. And so that is the end of the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions from any of you if you want to jot them into the conversation section, or if you want to turn on your microphones and ask them, you can do so now. But what I will do in the meanwhile is stop the recording, just so we can open the floor to any questions from anyone. So thanks a million, everyone.